The Marinade.
There's no O in Marinade. Let's try it one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
The Marinade.
Marinade.
Bone marinade. The
That's
Marinade.
The Marinade. With Jason Earle.
Bird on a high wire singing to me, led me out of this town. Cries from the beggars in
Welcome to The Marinade with Jason Earle, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. This is episode 32, and our guest is Graham Sharp of Steep Canyon Rangers. Steep Canyon Rangers is quite possibly our favorite bluegrass band on the planet. Graham Sharp and Woody Platt are the principal songwriters for the band, and what they're able to do is pure magic. So good is Steep Canyon Rangers that the legendary Steve Martin enlisted them as his backing band, but this is much more than just Steve Martin's backing band. Graham writes these literary songs, and then the band just plays them expertly and gorgeously. A Steep Canyon Rangers show is always a clinic, and their set at 2019's Suwannee Spring Reunion was no exception. Y'all know, if you listen to this show, that Suwannee is my favorite place on earth, and Spring Reunion is one of my favorite festivals and favorite experiences in the world. Graham graciously sat down with the Marinade aboard Steep Canyon Rangers tour bus at the beautiful Spirit of the Suwannee Music Park back in March. I step aboard the coach, shake hands with the formidable Woody Platt, the other principal songwriter in the band, and then meet Graham. And we make our way to the back of the bus. It's a communal area with a bench around the room and a table to the side. Somebody's playing on the main stage, Larry Keel perhaps. It's a nice bus. The sound from the main stage and the front of the bus is well muffled, but you can kind of hear the music wafting in. And Graham sits on the bench, noodling his banjo while I get situated. Ladies and gentlemen, Graham Sharp.
Maybe. Where?
Hey. The old Spring Fest, maybe?
Yeah.
I think it was maybe it was even the last year of Spring Fest.
Yeah.
And that was my first. I mean, I knew the name and everything, but so that would have been probably like 2011 or 12, I guess.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
That was kind of my proper introduction.
Yeah, I know this festival's going through some changes, but I tell you what, man, I'm among the many that are glad it's still up and running.
It doesn't get a whole lot. I mean, it's just like, like I mentioned earlier, going through all that stuff with Dad, I've been tense, as you do when you're in those kind of situations.
Yep.
And I haven't totally decompressed because I just got here, but it's like I'm finally starting. I can feel it melting off of me. I can feel like the stress is melting off of me.
Yeah, this place will do that for you.
For sure. Hey. Well, Graham, thanks so much, man.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. This is a good place to be meeting.
This place, I tell you what, I mean, well, I wanted to get into that. So I want to talk about process, and I want to talk about influences and all that kind of good stuff. But like we've been talking about Suwannee kind of off mic, and then a little bit, here we're sitting here on your bus right backstage.
Yep.
You guys are going to go on a little bit later today. And I don't know if you got a chance to look at the lineup much.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have anybody that you're like, man, in a dream jam session kind of situation or later in the trees? I don't know if you guys make it out there, but in the picking circles, anybody here that you're like, man, I just got to get down with that person?
I mean, like Sean Camp and like those guys, I mean, whether or not sit down and play music with them, but like there's a strain that they have that they've managed to keep running through this festival, which is like that Guy Clark, real heavy like songwriter strain that they've kept here like year after year, whether it's Verlin and Sean, but something about this place has a real connection to that music, which is unique for a festival, to kind of have like almost like a patron saint kind of thing as far as the music goes. So like I caught that set with Berlin and Sean last year doing a tribute to Guy Clark. It's about the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen.
Incredible.
So, I mean, like, just you leave this place inspired just by that, just by that spirit. Not to mention everybody else. I think we're going to pick with Larry Keel a little bit here in just a few minutes and go join him. He's still just, man,
he's incredible.
Is fire. Yeah.
He's incredible.
Yeah.
The energy that he brings.
Yeah.
And how he brings it every single time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that I think with a lot of these folks around here is that you don't have sets that people are phoning in. Everybody brings it so intensely.
Everybody's been cooped up all winter, We get out here and it's the first sunshine of the year, and everybody just feels great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel it.
Yeah. Seriously, there is that energy about this place, and it's magical. And for folks listening to this, if you haven't been, make that trip to Suwannee, regardless, because there is that core. Verlin's always here. Verlin was episode 2 of this show, actually. Awesome. Verlin's just an incredible dude and an incredible writer. Verlin's always here. Sean now these days is almost always here. Jim Lauderdale's always here.
Totally.
And that spirit, every single time I'm here, you feel that. But getting back to you and kind of like, I think one of the things that I find so interesting about Steep Canyon Rangers is that there is certainly the commitment to playing your instruments, and that's one of the things that when I go to see bluegrass, a lot of times that's what tends to draw me.
Totally.
But there's a literary element to your lyrics as well.
Yeah. And
so I wonder if you could kind of talk about what your process personally looks like and how that fits in with the band.
Yeah. I mean, this is the process room right here in the back of the bus,
Oh, wow.
I actually get to spend, a good bit of time back here just kind of trying to be regular about it, when we're on the road, just try to always just carve out time, whether I'm really feeling it or not, and just try to commit myself to the process. I think, you're talking about instruments, and like for bluegrass, it's always judged, it's really judged at a high bar,
right,
for the musicians,
right,
and that takes a lot of just practice, just straight up woodshedding, and so for me, that's just kind of the process I bring to songwriting as well. It's just kind of the only way I know, which is just to get in there and get after it, and a lot of times you're gonna leave, disappointed, or just not even disappointed, just like, well, that didn't really come to anything, but it's worth it for those times when you're just like, oh, I got something, and working with the band is even that much cooler because these guys are kind of like, in some ways, sort of archivists, or like the memory of these things. So like I'll write something, we'll mess with it maybe a couple times, and then get on to something else. And like just yesterday, Woody and I were sitting back here, and like a song from 4 months ago that I hadn't really thought a whole lot about just kind of resurfaced, and we were back here playing it. And as a songwriter, that feels awesome.
Yeah.
To have people who are like, oh man, remember this? I love this. Let's go back and work on this. And just like, it gives you a great feeling.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel as a writer, unlike a lot of writers, not all by any means, but I write like specifically for the band. Like when I'm writing, I'm thinking about the Steep Canyon Rangers and like how this is going to translate with this band. So taking into account voices, instruments, all that. So, that's kind of secondary in the writing process, but it definitely comes into how I think about, songs falling together.
So what does that look like in practice? Are you get up and have your coffee and sit down and start writing, or like this is the space, but what does that actually physically look like?
Yeah, or I mean, sometimes, for writing, I just have to have a lot of kind of options, so like whether I'm just sitting down without a guitar and a notebook, trying to get some thoughts down, some words, some ideas, or whether it's sitting with a guitar and no notebook and just playing stuff and just trying to find a feel, and seeing what will fall into that. But I think we get a lot of time to be out among people, you know, traveling as much as we do and stuff like that. So just to have a little space where you can kind of go and process everything. And, you know, like I say, a lot of times it comes to naught, and you'll feel like, you know, you spent some time and didn't get much out of it. And then 2 days later, it'll hit you and you're like, oh, that's what I was doing. And all of a sudden you're on this track. So for me, it's just a process of coming back to it and coming back to it.
Is that all? Are you putting that physically down on paper? Is that in your head?
Yeah, a little bit of both, you know, or maybe even if I'm walking around just making something in my head, just making a little iPhone recording of it, coming back to it. So all the above, you know, I try to, like I say, have as many different avenues to make something work. And I've been doing more co-writing in the last year or so than I have in the past, which has been great. You know, I feel like there's people who I've written stuff with that I definitely wouldn't have written otherwise. And, you know, when you get to that and you look at it, you feel a little bit uncomfortable with it. You know, you're like, this isn't how I would have said this. But then you take it to the band again, and they're a great sounding board for, like, is this cool? Yeah, this works. Or, you know, no, this doesn't sound like us, or that kind of thing.
How is that process different? And when you say co-writing, is that specifically with Woody, or is that with other people?
I've been writing with some other folks, around, you know, mostly around Asheville, where we live. There's some really talented people there, and a couple people who kind of come and go, do stuff in Nashville as well, and kind of live in our area. So, you know, as much as I'd love to pick up and go spend a week in Nashville and, you know, catch up with Verlin or Jim or Sean or any of those people, I found it hard in my life. You know, I got young kids, and it's going to be hard to just, when you get back from tour, to take off again. So I try to make the most of my time at home as well. Both my kids are in school, so I get my mornings, and, you know, my wife's very understanding if I just am sitting around looking like I'm doing absolutely nothing. You know, she knows that's not always the case. You know, there's actually something going on there. It may not look like much to the eye. But.
That's really interesting. Like, you're just kind of like letting ideas marinate and
like I said, just like I said, just kind of processing stuff as much as I can, and sort of blocking out noise and being willing to write stupid stuff, you know, and not judging yourself too harshly. Like, at the beginning, you know, obviously there's like the whole process of whittling the stuff down and really trying to, you know, you get an idea, but then, you know, a big part of it for writing for me is trying to get images or kind of things that you can kind of put your hands on in songs. So a lot of times maybe that'll come in later, and a lot of times that's like the inspiration for a song. You know, like, we got a song on our last record called I Can't Get Home. And, you know, it kind of came around a lot of ways. Like, I was hanging out with a buddy who had been in the Delta Force and just got home, and we were just, you know, talking a lot, and we were making some music together and just hanging out. So kind of his whole experience was in my mind. And then I was just in the front yard one day, and my son ran by, and he ran by with his sister. He said, Rosalie, let's get the hell out of here. I was standing there with my wife. We just kind of looked at each other. And before you know it, I had the first line of that song, I know better than to cuss in my mama's house. And, you know, that just takes the idea of, you know, the soldier or anybody really, you know, with the home who, you know, kind of losing it. I just kind of took that idea and put it in a really specific spot.
Right.
And I think that's, you know, it's not necessary to a good song, but I think a lot of good songs bear that.
I've been thinking a lot about that. There's so many things I want to ask around that question. So the first thing is, when that moment happened with your son, did you need to go write it down, or is that going to be there later when you sit down to write?
I don't think that time I particularly went and wrote it down, but, you know, in general practice, it's good not to trust your memory, because, you know, it's easy for things to get lost. And I've definitely had moments where I'm like, oh, that's great, I'll remember that. You know, singing to myself, and then you get down and sit with the guitar, you're like, oh, no,
what was that?
It's gone.
Yeah.
Totally gone. But you know, I mean, I was talking to my friend Frank Serio earlier, you know, and just talking about keeping the antenna up, you know, kind of at all times. And I think that's what songwriters do, you know, they notice things, you know, like I remember when we were working with Edie Brickell, she was on this thing, she was writing a song a day and she would publish it on SoundCloud. Did that for over a year.
Wow.
And, you know, she was so good, and she described them as miracles, you know, but so good at just picking out little pieces of a day or what was in her head and like seeing what was special in that and really kind of using that as a way in.
It's amazing that a song a day is crazy.
It's insane.
It's really incredible.
Yeah.
And like I've been trying to write songs recently, and I've done it for years, but it's always a private therapy for me. It's never been a thing that I played for anybody else.
Yeah.
And then I talked with the songwriter Amy McCarley. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she's amazing.
Okay.
And during the conversation, I mentioned that I write songs and I don't play them for anybody. And she's like, "You got to go out and play them. Just go do it. Just go play an open mic or whatever." So I did.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful.
Yeah.
And then I was like, all right, every 2 weeks now, that'd be my goal.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write a song every 2 weeks. I'm gonna get up and play it. So far, so good.
That's awesome.
But it's been interesting now, especially at talking about process, because there are moments like if I have to write it down.
Sure.
Right. So like if I don't write it down, it is gone.
Yeah.
And some of them, like this, I wrote the other day, it just came out of me.
Yeah.
Right.
There's not even barely any scratches on that piece of paper.
Yep. And I've changed a few things since then, but I did yard work all day, and I was in that space, you know, where like the sun has been hitting you and you're tired, but you're feeling good and you're feeling accomplished. And the idea came to me, and I just immediately put it in my phone, actually, because I just wasn't near paper.
Yeah.
And then I went and wrote it all out. But then another one, I had an idea, the one like the day before, I had this idea, and I don't know where the hell to go with it. Right. So I've got like verse, chorus, basically. And then I don't know who the other characters are, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
You find yourself hitting that spot, and if so, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, what do they call it? Like the second verse block or something like that.
I didn't know it was like a phenomenon.
It's a common thing, I think. Yeah, that's hard. I mean, I definitely have songs that, you know, I'm like, this just didn't finish, you know, and we'll be messing around with the band and be like, this is great, let's work it up. It's like, no, it's not done. It needs something. You know, and I don't really know the best cure for that, but you know, a lot of things that I have tried to do is just try to get yourself in that place, and then just try to conjure something in your memory, you know, of a place or a you know, a smell or something very distinct, and see if that can get you there. Because, you know, the senses are a great place to ground songs, and a great way to get a bigger point across to people without them even knowing that that's what's going on.
Oh, I love that. Because a lot of times when I'm writing about somebody else's music, writing about music is a real incredibly hard thing.
Right.
How do you...
They call it dancing about architecture.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, I've never heard that expression. That's funny. Yeah, exactly. It's really, really difficult. But the thing that I found that works really well is relating it to food.
Yeah.
And I never really thought about the process of writing a song also starting with a sense of some sort, whether it's taste or smell or sight or whatever, and then writing things. Because to me, it always tends to be about characters when I go to write a song or a poem.
Awesome.
It tends to be about the, you know, in fact, most of them are real life stories. They're almost completely nonfiction, you know, and then of course I embellish and that kind of thing. But it's almost always about characters, and I don't think I haven't approached it from that perspective. I love that. Right.
Yeah, maybe it's like, you know, if this character is, you know, sees this walking down the street, how do they react? Or like, or as simple as like, what does this character do when they get up in the morning? What do they do? What are they doing in, like, you know, those minutes between during the day when, you know, they don't have anywhere special to be, or, you know, just little moments like that.
Right.
It's always struck me, you know, like, one of my favorite songwriters of all time, especially as far as like character talk goes, is a guy named Terry Allen. who just writes unbelievable sort of really character studies of people, and I mean he will put you like right there in that room, like you know that person. Like, I know this person. Like I've been there, and this person knows me.
Yeah.
You know, and they probably know, you know, they probably know somebody in my family too. Or, you know, we probably got some of the same friends.
Yeah. Well, and that's what makes a great. I feel like that connection is what makes a great book. It's what makes a great film. It's why I struggled with The Wire, the TV show, because I didn't like anybody.
Right.
I didn't like anybody. I had such a hard time connecting, you know. But then David Simon made Treme, and I connected with everybody.
Yeah.
You know, so I was like, I can't get enough of this thing because I'm like, man, I know that person and that person and that person.
Yeah.
I want to know that person.
Yeah.
Right. And then with books too, like the book I'm reading right now, I'm just so hooked because I'm like, even though it's a Japanese author and it all takes place in Japan, I know all those people. You know, in different ways.
Yeah.
And
what's the book?
It's called Colorless Sakuro Tazaki and His Pilgrimage of Years. Murakami is the author.
Oh yeah, same guy who wrote the Wind Up Bird Chronicles.
And Norwegian Wood.
Okay.
And I don't know. Did you read the Wind Up Bird Chronicles?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something about those characters, the way he lays out the character.
And then they're in such a strange world.
Yeah.
But they're very human.
Yeah.
Characters.
Well, in this one, it's like you don't really. The protagonist isn't really sure what's real and what's not.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And but the narrator lets you in on that pretty clearly, and so you're totally. It's not. You don't feel lost. It's not like one of those kind of like. Just completely out there fantasy worlds where you're like, man, I got to be locked in to be able to process this, because the narrator kind of helps you along, and I'm okay with that. I'm not insulted by that. If you want to take me by the hand,
no doubt, show me something. Take me there and show it to me.
Yeah,
you know, and like let me see it through somebody's eyes.
Yeah,
like that, because I mean, you know, taking people and putting them in these extraordinary situations,
right?
You know, whether it's a tiny, small moment like, you know, whatever, Proust's narrator stepping on a cobblestone and all of a sudden his mind is reeling to somewhere 10 years ago, you know, and it takes him and transports him out of time, you know.
Right.
Doesn't have to be a monumental moment. It just has to resonate, you know. It has to have that spark.
And those smaller moments tend to be the ones I feel like that resonate more, because we can all relate to it.
Totally.
Maybe it's not the cobblestone, but it's something similar.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
You know, that resonates with you, and I think that's what folk music and bluegrass and country, blues too. I mean, all great music, I suppose. That's the thing that people can get so fired up about, is I can connect in some way.
Yeah.
To those characters, because they are so real and they are going through those ordinary things, you know, that we all struggle with.
Yeah, no, I mean, for us, you know, playing bluegrass and kind of learning that whole repertoire, you know, like that was our real meat and potatoes, you know, as far as our music, as far as our education as a band, you know. And then you get to a point and you're looking around and you're like, you know, we're singing about like cabins and yada yada and stuff like that like doesn't really seem to apply to us. And that was, you know, I think a big push as far as us developing our own material, is like, we got to sing about something that we know, you know, or something, you know, that makes us unique. And I mean, obviously, like, those songs were somebody's real story, and tons of people gravitated towards that and associated with that. But for us, you know, we associate with the music, but not necessarily maybe that world of background or images, you know.
Right. But still, you're able to make that connection, and that's, again, what comes through in the music, and that's what allows people to access things that otherwise. And that's an interesting thing about music too, is that, like, I don't know a lick of banjo, but man, that hits me hard. You know, a really great banjo player moves me in such a way.
Yeah.
You know, and I just can play some rudimentary guitar, but somebody who can really play the fiddle, for some reason I feel like that's the magic, I guess, of music.
Yeah.
Is that even though you may not have any experience with that particular instrument or that type of music, even like the fact that so many suburban white kids can connect to hip hop, for example, even though their reality is so different. That's the magic of music.
Yeah.
It's so incredible.
Yeah, that's right. It is.
Just a couple other things. One of the things I always like to ask is what you're consuming. Like, what are you listening to? What books are you reading? What films are you watching? That kind of thing.
Right. Let's see. Right now I'm reading a crazy book. It's like, it's not crazy, but it's like this kind of contemporary Christian philosophy.
Interesting.
That my parents turned me on to. I was raised in the church, but it never really seemed to. A lot of it just didn't apply to me, or was just seemed anti. Just didn't. I couldn't find the real reason for a lot of it, But it's I can't even remember the name, but basically it's like the church needs a new reformation. It's kind of, and he's like laid out like 12 posits to like what the church actually needs to change.
Yeah.
So I'm reading that. I'm at the tail end of an Annie Dillard book. It kind of dovetails with that a little bit. It's called For the Time Being, I think. And I mean, it's just a beautifully written book. Yeah, as far as music, I'm kind of always just trying to keep it diverse, I mean, my go-to is, just putting on some blues, like some acoustic blues, and just the simplicity of that. And, I don't, it's hard to write a simple song, like that can be like one of the hardest things to do, so,
You made me think of something, because I wanted to ask you about this too. Is like the thing that I'm finding going through the process of writing songs more frequently now is that I don't know when to shut up. I don't know when to allow. I'm starting to try to figure out when to allow space. And not feel like I have to fill with so much. Because I tend to get a little bit wordy, and then sometimes I'll say something and I'll go, "Oh shit, that's pretty heavy, man. You should probably allow that to sink in." I mean, this song is about a 15-year-old boy getting shot in the back in gang violence. It's a true story about a young man that I knew and mentored, and that's a heavy that's a lot of stuff that's in there. I mean, it moves me to tears almost every time I play it, but I'm trying to fit all this stuff in. And then I realized when I was playing it the last time that, wait a minute, there's a moment there that, like, if I need a break, the listener probably needs a break too.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do have to, like, trust that your listener is listening and paying attention and allowing them to fill in. Allowing them to fill in the blank spaces with their own experience, because that's how they're really gonna feel the song and remember the song, as if maybe you don't tell them everything, maybe you leave some room for them to paint it in their own colors, just give them the lines and let them fill it in with their own colors.
Are you conscious of that as you're writing?
I think no, but I can see it when it happens, like with the band, if I'm playing a song for them. But usually it's in the process of going back through it. Be like, oh, I overtold this right here. Like I could say less, and maybe it would mean more. And instead of saying, I think back maybe like a song like of ours, like Going Midwest. The song has a verse like, I used to love that breeze, playing around your summer dress. I hope that's the way I always remember you best. Rather than saying, yeah, we had a great summer together and now we're not together anymore. And, I really miss that, Maybe say a little bit less, and you can still get in that sentiment, but couched inside like a real memory, a picture.
Do you get there yourself, or is that something that you need feedback from people
I think I get there myself.
Yeah.
Certainly not all the time. You know,
Sure.
I mean, a lot of it's, I wouldn't say getting lucky, but just, I come back to the process. You know, just being there for it to happen.
Yeah, it sounds like it's not luck at all. It's you doing the work.
Right. You just got to be there.
Yeah.
You know.
Right. Well, man, thank you for being here.
Oh,
I really
such a
appreciate this,
pleasure.
dude. That was great.
Yeah.
I really
Thanks for your
appreciate it.
time.
Can't wait for the set later.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun, man.
Awesome.
This is just a great festival. It feels so good here. So
Yeah.
Great way to
Dude.
kick it off. I appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Graham.
Bird on a high wire singing to me, led me out of this town. Cries from the beggars and the in-betweens led me out of this town. The sun burns hotter than it's done before, led me out of this town. Boys on the block shouting Civil War, led me out of this town. Me ain't nothing
Graham
but
Sharp,
a
y'all.
mess.
Thank you, Graham, for sitting down with us. Thank you to everybody at Spirit of the Suwannee Music Park and Suwannee Spring Reunion for your unwavering hospitality. When you do this work, you encounter all kinds of situations, and Spirit of the Suwannee and the Two Roots festivals are always class acts. They always take care of us, and I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I have at those places. Follow the Marinade on social media. Subscribe to the show on your podcast app. Leave us a rating. Tell somebody about the show. These are all free, easy things you can do to help us out and to help spread the word. If you really like what we're doing and you can swing a few dollars a month, take a look at our Patreon community over at patreon.com/Marinade Podcast. For the price of just the change in your car center console, you can get exclusive content like our Patreon exclusive show, Jason's Journey, where I talk about the moments that have shaped my creative life. We've also revamped, so our $20 tier will now allow you to get a hat or a shirt, some Marinade swag that allows you to rep the show on a different level. It's really an excellent deal and a way to share your Marinade pride. Our Marinade community is truly special. We interact on a deep level about process and about just life in general, and we've got room for more. We're a very welcoming group. All right, y'all, it's time for what I'm getting down on, this segment where I share the books, the films, the shows, the articles, whatever's inspiring me at the moment. I'm absolutely obsessed with Chernobyl on HBO and its accompanying podcast. It's really cool to watch the show and then listen to the podcast and hear a little bit more of the history of what happened at the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. It may have happened in the 80s, but that campaign of misinformation and denial that led to the disaster and its cover-up are just incredibly relevant to the political and social climate in this country today, unfortunately. Check it out. Highly recommend it. It's beautifully shot, beautifully acted, and gorgeously written. I've also been listening to a couple of things, specifically Yola. I don't know what in the world happened to me that I missed this, or what took me so long to get to her album, Walk Through Fire, but I'm so glad I finally got to it. I've also been listening to a lot of Amanda Palmer. Amanda is my partner, Chris's favorite artist of all time, and we had the distinct pleasure and honor of seeing her play in Atlanta recently. She played for 4.5 hours, y'all. Maybe a 15-minute intermission. A really powerful night of her, a piano, a ukulele, and stories. I mean, just an incredible experience, which of course led me to listen to a lot more of her old stuff. And I've been into Amanda for a few years, especially since I met Chris, but I highly recommend checking it out. And if you want to hear more about that experience, head over to Patreon and become a patron. I opened that one up to even our $2 patrons. I really came to a very serious personal realization during that experience. So if you want to know more about that, check out our Patreon community. For just $2, you can get that episode of Jason's Journey. Thank you all so much for listening. I don't have anything to tell you about reading specifically. I'm not real fired up about what I'm reading at the moment, and I don't want to disparage it. So I'll leave that. But I appreciate y'all. I love you. Thank you so much for listening. Go out there and create something. Cheers, y'all.